All right, everyone. And for our last set of examples, we have to learn yet another different factoring pattern. Right, so we're on example F. I'm going to write F down here just so I have some more space when it comes to working out this problem. Okay. All right. So F. Okay. Well, I have a quadratic equation. I'm going to want to solve for x. All right. What do I do with quadratic equations? I want to set them equal to 0. Okay. It's always a good idea to keep your x squared positive. It's just harder to work with negative x squared. So the 2x squared is actually in a good spot. We want to move the other numbers over. All right, to do that, remember you're just moving something over to the other side. And when you do that, you just change the sign. So the minus 9x, I'll add it to the other side and become a plus 9x. The positive 5, I'll move it to the other side and it becomes a negative 5, all right? So, just there, I'm moving stuff to the other side. So I just, switch the sign, right? Instead of writing out each step. Okay, so I have 2x squared plus 9x minus 5 equals 0. Now, okay, when I look at this equation, just like I did the other ones, you look for greatest common factor because you have that 2x squared in front of the x squared, and you like to have x squareds. You don't like to have numbers in front of it. So if you can get rid of that number, great. But you look at this one carefully, and well, if I try greatest common factor, well, there's no greatest common factor, so I can't get rid of that 2 that way. I'm gonna have to somehow, still leave the 2 there within my equation. All right. Now, so here's where you run into some issues, all right, with this one. If you try to factor this one, if you try to factor it one way, it becomes a lot of trial and error because this is what happens, all right? You have a 2x squared. Well, okay, so if I want to factor out a 2x, well, that would have to be a 2x and a 1x. Okay, fair enough. And then maybe I would look at the last number, which is a negative 5, and then I would ask myself, okay, if it's a negative 5, what gives me a negative 5? Well, it can be a positive 5 and a negative 1. All right, maybe it's like that. Okay, maybe it works out like that. But then if you kind of check your answers there, you're not going to get that 9 from these numbers. Okay, so it doesn't work that way. So maybe we should have written the numbers in a different way. Well, maybe I should have put, okay, maybe I should have put the x here and the 5 here, and maybe I should have had the 2x here with the minus 1. Maybe that one would have worked. Okay, or maybe the 1 should have been positive in the first place, and maybe the 5 should have been negative, right? You have all these possibilities, and I can keep going with all the different combinations. So you don't want to go this route because it gets kind of complicated just randomly guessing where do I place all those numbers, all right? It's nice when you have an x squared because things stay the same because you have x and x. And you don't have to worry about where your x's go. When you have a number in front here, you need to worry about where those x's go because it actually affects how your numbers work out. So that just doing random things there and trying to figure out the factors, it takes time to do, and you don't want to do that. So you of course don't want to do anything by just guessing. You want to do something that's sure and going to get you the answer. Okay, so here's how we do that. There's a method called bottoms up. Okay. So the first thing with bottoms up, that 2 over here, this 2 is complicating some things. So my first step with bottoms up is I'm going to multiply the 2 times the negative 5. So my equation becomes an x squared. And I still have the 2 in my equation. I just kind of put it together with the negative 5. All right. Now bear with me on this. This works, and it helps us factor. So the first step in bottoms up is I actually multiply the first and last numbers together, right? Those are my A and my C. So I multiply A and C, and then I write my equation as x squared plus bx plus ac equals 0. Okay. In other words, I turned my my 2x squared into an x squared, and now my last number still has the 2 in there. You're just rewriting it now as a negative 10 instead of a negative 5. And this actually, it's easier to factor this way. All right. Now the next step is, well, now that I have an x squared, now factoring is super easy because I'm going to do x and x. And then I'm going to take the negative 10 and think of the numbers that multiply to negative 10, but at the same time add up to 9. All right, well, that's easy because 10 and negative 1 add up to 9. 10 minus 1 is 9. And 10 times negative 1 is negative 10. So there are my factors, okay? So my third step here is I go ahead and factor. Now, here's the only thing. Now, because before I solve for x, there's one more step before I solve for x. Because I multiplied the 2 at the beginning, I need to take that 2 out of my original equation and bring it back to the front. All right? I need to bring that 2 back to the front. But now, well, where does it, I still have the same question. Which one of these has a 2? Where does the 2 go? All right? So here's what I do. You divide your numbers by that 2, or in other words, you divide by your a, which is your, the number in front of your x squared. You divide by a, so that kind of undoes what we did at the beginning, and it brings the 2 back into our equation so we can solve for x, okay? Now what this does is if it so happens that my numbers divide evenly, I divide them. If they do not divide evenly, you do bottoms up. So I'm going to bring this 2 over to the x in front, and I'm gonna write my factors like this. All right. All right, so that last step there. So we basically do there, we reduce the fractions and you're also doing bottoms up. Reduce the fractions and bottoms up. Okay, and then the last step here, we're just gonna solve. We're just gonna solve for our x. Okay, x plus 5 equals 0. Not too bad. You know the answer. What the answer is going to be there. The answer is going to be negative 5. 2x minus 1 equals 0. Move the 1 over, and then divide by 2, and your answer is a 1/2. All right, so there are your solutions. Your answers are negative 5 and 1/2 for the for equation F. Negative 5 and 1/2. Okay, so that's how bottoms up works. And you use that in the case where you can't do greatest common factor and nothing else is working. You kind of resort to that. Okay, let's do G together now. All right, G. Well, I look at my equation. Okay, and I have to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to write it like this. Move the 3 over and it becomes negative. Okay. Do they have a greatest common factor? No, so I can't go that route. So bottoms up. I multiply the first and last numbers, and then I write it as x squared. The last number changes into a negative 18, because 6 times 3 is negative 18. I factor. Okay, so I think what multiplies out to negative 18 but adds up to a positive 7. Okay, so 18, 1 times 18, 3 times 6, or 2 times 9. If I run through all those combinations, which ones will add up to a 7, a positive 9, and a negative 2? So those are my factors. All right, and then bottoms up, before I solve for x, you have to bring back your number from your x squared from the beginning, which was a 6, and you have to divide it to your numbers. So you do bottoms up if the numbers do not reduce. So you need to divide your numbers first. So both of these, we have the situation that our numbers here reduce. 9 divided by 6 is 3/2. 2 divided by 6 is 1/3. Okay. So to finish this off here, remember we do bottoms up if we're left with fractions. Move the fraction to the front of the x. So this becomes 2x plus 3 and 3x minus 1. Okay. And then, well, we just do the usual. We solve for x. And those are our two answers. All right. Okay. On H, what you're going to do on H, now remember I said earlier, when you factor, it's always best that you have a positive x squared. If you don't have a positive x squared, it actually complicates things. So H, even though my numbers are already on the right side, I'm actually going to move my numbers to the left side because I want to work with a positive x squared, not a negative x squared. So I'll move the 2 over and make it a positive x squared. The 7 stays on that side, and I'll move the 15, it becomes a negative 15. All right? And then here, just like before, bottoms up, 2 times 15, that's a negative 30. Factor x. Okay, what two numbers give me negative 30 and add up to 7? Remember, if you need to write out your factors, that's perfectly fine. 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, okay, 5 and 6. All right, but out of all those, you want to make these numbers into a 7. You want it to add up to a 7. So it's a negative 30 as well. So because it adds up to a 7, your bigger numbers should be positive because you have a positive 7. So which one of these gives me a negative 30 but adds up to a 7? The negative 3 and the 10 are the ones that are going to work. So it's going to be a positive 10 and a negative 3. All right. Now here we have to do bottoms up. I'm going to bring this 2 back here. I'm going to divide both of my numbers by 2. Divide and reduce. 10 over 2 is 5, so that reduced. If you cannot reduce, you need to do bottoms up and flip that 2 over to the x. And these are your factors. Okay. And then in the end, my answers are going to be negative 5. And my answer to this one's going to be 3/2. So my answer was negative 5 and 3/2.